All right, so picture this. You're leading a political party, trying to, like, clean up its image, shake off a reputation for being corrupt, and suddenly, bam, the former president, who basically, like, embodies all those scandals, wants back in.
Talk about awkwards, right?
It's totally the situation brewing in South Africa right now with Jacob Zuma and the ANC.
Oh, it's messy.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And it has everyone wondering what on earth is going to happen next.
Yeah, it's a total political drama with, like, really high stakes.
Yeah.
To really get it, we kind of have to rewind back to the 2024 South African elections.
Okay.
For the first time ever, the ANC, the African National Congress, they lost their parliamentary majority.
Wow.
So they had to form a coalition government.
Huge.
Which, for a party that's dominated South African politics since apartheid ended, I mean, that was a huge blow.
Yeah, and that's where Zuma's, like, public endorsement of that rival party, the Umkhonto Weesizwe party, also called the MK party.
Right.
That really, like, throws fuel on the fire.
Totally, because it wasn't just any old endorsement.
Mm-hmm.
This was during the election.
Oh, yeah.
Right after the ANC had expelled Zuma for, well, let's just say, not exactly upholding the highest ethical standards.
Right.
They basically accused him of, like, sabotaging the party at, like, the worst possible moment.
Yeah, so it wasn't just, like, internal party drama, it was about the ANC trying to, like, distance themselves from all the baggage that Zuma represented.
Exactly. They wanted to, like, project this image of reform and renewal.
Yeah.
Trying to win back the public's trust. And, well, Zuma, with all the controversy surrounding him, doesn't really fit that picture.
But then he pulls this move trying to rejoin the party that he openly campaigned against.
I know. It's like, hey, remember me. I'm back.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the ANC, they're in such a delicate position right now.
Yeah.
This coalition government is fragile.
Uh-huh.
There are divisions within the party itself, and bringing Zuma back could totally upend everything they're trying to do.
So what are the chances that the ANC would actually, like, welcome him back?
With open arms. I mean, under the current leadership, highly unlikely.
Really?
President Ramaphosa and his allies are very much focused on rebuilding trust.
Okay.
Moving away from all that factionalism that was like a hallmark of the Zuma era.
And when we say factionalism, we're talking about...
Oh, yeah, those intense rivalries between different groups within the ANC.
Okay.
Bringing Zuma back would risk alienating members and voters who see him as a symbol of, the ANC's past problems.
Especially because Zuma himself said he wouldn't even vote for the ANC even if he was allowed back in.
Right. It's like, then what's the point?
Yeah.
It makes his motives so hard to figure out.
Yeah.
Is this really about him wanting to rejoin the party, or is it more about ego, staying relevant, holding on to some power?
Okay, so let's say, just for argument's sake, that Zuma somehow gets back into the ANC.
Okay.
Would he actually be able to wield any real influence?
I mean, even if he did return, his influence would be way less than when he was president.
Really?
The political landscape has totally changed. Remember, the ANC lost their parliamentary majority for a reason.
Yeah.
Public frustration with all those corruption scandals during Zuma's presidency was a big part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, dissatisfaction with how the ANC handled things like unemployment and the lack of basic services.
Yeah.
They're in a much weaker position now, and they're trying to walk this tightrope between pushing for reforms and keeping their coalition together.
Yeah.
Bringing Zuma back could totally alienate their coalition partners.
So basically, Zuma's style of politics, the whole pitting different factions against each other,
Right.
that wouldn't exactly create stability right now.
Exactly. It would be like throwing a grenade into an already fragile situation.
And hasn't his faction within the ANC, like, weakened since he was president?
It has.
Okay.
The rise of that MK party, the one he supported, that suggests a lot of his former allies have moved on.
Interesting.
They got a lot of votes in 2024, which shows there's a real desire for an alternative to the ANC, even among some traditional ANC supporters.
So it seems like Zuma might be kind of clinging to a past where he had a lot more power. Like, he hasn't quite grasped how things have changed.
It's almost as if he's playing checkers and everyone else has moved on to chess.
Oh, I like that.
The game's different, the players are different, and the stakes are even higher now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to get back in the ring after years of retirement,
Right. The muscle memory might be there, but everything's different now.
Exactly.
And don't forget, by endorsing that MK party,
Oh, yeah.
Zuma might have really burned some bridges with the ANC.
For sure.
Like, he sided with their rivals.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to play both sides.
Right.
But he could end up alienating everyone.
It's risky, that's for sure. And it makes you wonder, what's his end game here?
Yeah, is he serious about rejoining, or is this like a power play?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What are the possibilities?
Well, one thought is he's trying to be a kingmaker.
Okay.
Someone who can pull strings from outside the system.
Fine.
Because even though his faction in the ANC is weaker, he still has a lot of loyal followers.
That's true.
People who admire him, for his charisma, his role in fighting apartheid, and they see him as someone who champions the poor and marginalized.
So he could use that support to try and influence things in the ANC, even without an official position.
Exactly.
So he could be thinking the ANC needs him more than he needs them.
Maybe, especially with the ANC in such a tough spot right now.
Yeah.
They're balancing on a tightrope, trying to stay unified while also pushing for reforms. And Zuma coming back could totally mess that up.
Yeah.
His presence would be a constant reminder of all the parties' internal conflicts.
It's like he's forcing them to look in the mirror and confront their past.
Right. And that division is out there in public opinion, too.
Yeah.
Zuma's a polarizing figure.
Definitely.
Some see him as a hero, but others see him as the face of corruption and the ANC's decline.
Yeah, because his presidency wasn't exactly scandal-free.
No, not at all.
There were allegations of corruption, state capture, misuse of public funds.
Right. And all that tarnished the ANC's image.
Big time.
And that's the baggage they're trying so hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
They want to show they're a new party committed to ethical leadership and good governance. Bringing Zuma back would totally contradict that.
Yeah, it'd be like trying to sell a used car with a huge dent and saying, don't worry, it's still a good car.
Exactly. Buyers are going to be skeptical.
Well, in this case, the buyers are South African voters.
Exactly. And even if Zuma rejoined, there's no guarantee his supporters would follow him back.
That's true, especially if they found a new political home with the MK party.
Right. They might see the MK party as a better option.
Yeah.
One that actually represents them and aligns with their values.
So Zuma might end up leading a smaller group with less power than before.
Exactly.
It seems like a classic political miscalculation.
It does.
He might have thought he had more influence than he really does and underestimated how much South African politics has changed.
It's like he's trying to turn back time, but time keeps moving forward, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And politics, just like life, rarely gives second chances.
Okay, so let's switch gears for a minute and talk about what all this means for the ANC. We've talked about the divisions and trying to stay unified, but what are the bigger implications?
One big worry is what it does to the ANC's stability, especially with this fragile coalition government.
Oh, right. They've never had to share power before.
Exactly. This is new for them, and they're still learning how to navigate it.
And Zuma coming back could just throw everything off.
Totally. It could make those tensions within the coalition even worse, lead to gridlock instability, maybe even the government collapsing.
That's a scary thought.
And what about their efforts to rebuild credibility?
Oh, yeah.
We talked about them distancing themselves from those Zuma-era scandals.
Right.
But wouldn't bringing him back just bring all that back?
Exactly. It sends a mixed message to everyone.
Totally. Like, on one hand, they're saying we're serious about fighting corruption and cleaning up. But on the other hand, they're welcoming back the guy who represents all those past problems.
Yeah, it's like trying to convince people you've changed while still hanging out with your old troublemaking friends.
Exactly. It undermines their credibility.
Yeah.
Makes their talk about reform sound empty. It'd be a huge setback for them trying to rebuild trust and fix their image.
And what about the impact on South African politics as a whole?
Right.
We're talking about the biggest party in the country.
Yeah.
Their problems have to affect everything else.
Absolutely. How stable the ANC is or isn't affects the whole political system.
Okay.
Their internal divisions can spill over into parliament and affect how laws are made and how the country is run.
I see.
It creates uncertainty, which can scare investors, hurt the economy, and even affect how people get along.
So it's not just about the ANC.
Yeah.
It's about the future of South Africa.
Exactly. The stakes are really high.
Yeah.
And Zuma's actions, whether he means to or not, are making things even more intense.
It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck. You can see it coming, but you can't look away.
It's definitely a captivating political drama.
Yeah.
And one that we'll all be watching closely to see what happens next.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the main takeaway you want our listeners to remember about the potential consequences of Zuma's actions?
I think the most important thing to remember is that what Zuma's doing, whether it's really about rejoining the ANC or a power move, could destabilize not just the party, but South Africa's whole political system.
Yeah.
The effects of his actions could be felt for years.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how important responsible leadership is, especially in a democracy as young as South Africa.
Absolutely. The choices leaders make, the things they do, they have consequences that go way beyond their own ambitions or political games.
Mm.
It's about the whole country, the stability of the system, and the trust people put in their government.
So as we wrap up, I want to go back to something we talked about before, that idea of Zuma's legacy. We said it's both good and bad for him. But how do you think all this will change how he's remembered?
That's a great question. On the one hand, he's a hero of the fight against apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
He played a big part in the struggle for freedom and equality.
Mm-hmm.
But then his time as president was full of controversy, corruption allegations, and the ANC losing support. It's a complicated legacy, and this whole thing will just make it even more complicated.
It's like he's stuck between two stories, the liberator who fought for justice and the politician caught up in power struggles and shady dealings.
Exactly, and I
Mm.
think historians and future generations will have to figure out those two sides and decide what his place is in South African history.
It shows how political legacies are rarely simple.
Okay.
They're often messy, contradictory, and open to interpretation.
And that's what makes studying them so interesting. They show us the complexities of human nature, how power works, and the challenges of creating a fair and equal society.
So for our listeners who have been with us on this deep dive into South African politics, what's the one big takeaway, the one thing you want them to remember about this whole Zuma situation?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that politics is hardly ever straightforward. There are always hidden layers, competing interests, and things you don't see coming. And sometimes what one person does, even someone not officially in power, can totally change a nation's path. Zuma's determination to get back into the ANC, even though he's said he wouldn't vote for them, makes us ask some serious questions about power and legacy in politics. What makes people want power, even when their time seems to be over? What's behind their actions? And how do those motivations affect how they're remembered in the end? Those are questions we're thinking about not just in South Africa, but in any political system where individuals have power and influence.
It reminds us that politics is constantly changing, full of surprises, and we all have a part in shaping how it goes.
Totally. By staying informed, thinking critically, and holding our leaders accountable, we can help create a more just and fair world for everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.